in this world, there's basically, from what I've read in the book, there's like no technology, um, but people are spiritually evolved. So they communicate telepathically, they control the weather with their collective will, they pray to make plants grow, they're living in harmony with nature. When someone dies, it's because they want to die and their soul voluntarily leaves their body. It's like a ritual. Um, just really like amazing things like that. Um, so I have a lot of questions about that because I
Okay.
want to find out more, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that you'll be able to answer some of these. So I guess the interesting question, my dad thought that this was an interesting question. So how do, because this is basically like a paradise. It's like a Garden of Eden times like, a billion people.
Yeah.
So how do these people deal with Satan? Like, do they show indifference to Satan, or do they need to stay vigilant to make sure that evil doesn't creep in some sort of way? Is it something to actively work against, or do they just focus
Okay.
exclusively on like
Well,
love?
let me quote a favorite author of mine, Scott Peck, who was a psychiatrist. Um, he didn't believe in God particularly. He wasn't religious or anything, and got intrigued by the idea of exorcisms and got involved with some exorcists, and ultimately became a very strong Christian and lecturer and wrote books about his belief. Um, a book that he wrote called People of the Lie was in his early process of being influenced by these exorcisms and having real encounters with evil. And one of the lines that he wrote, and I quote Scott Peck, Dr. Scott Peck, is the only power that evil has is the power that we give it. Now, people might say, well, I experience evil in my life, but I've never worshiped Satan. I've never gone to a satanic church, you know, well, you can invite evil into your life. I'm not talking about being possessed by a demon. I'm talking about being influenced by evil. I want to make that really clear. Um, Most people who studied this say that possession is very, very rare, rarely happens, but that frankly, all of us are influenced by evil, by the demonic. Earlier we talked about Christmas being metamorphosized into a purely materialistic consumer, event. Um, Quite the opposite of its original intention, which was to celebrate of the coming of the Christ child into the world. Anyways, um, that would be an example. So, in regards to the future, they have no space for that in their lives. Um, One of my favorite lines in the Bible is from the 6th chapter of the book of Ephesians, and it talks about using the analogy of a Roman soldier's equipment. It talks about the helmet of salvation and the shield of faith and the breastplate of righteousness and um, girding your waist with the truth and wearing the shoes of peace. When I was a kid, I always loved knights and armors, and I still like the whole medieval knight thing. It's always fascinated me. So that metaphor really speaks to me. I think some people would probably like, they get nothing out of it. But the whole idea of the Ephesians chapter 6 is standing firm in the faith. And if we stand firm in our faith, there's no room for it in our lives. And um, what does faith look like? Faith looks like a life of trust and hope and joy. Um, that's what a life of faith looks like. So, like the benefits of faith are great. You know, I think people are afraid of faith because they have a terrible misconception of what it means to be a faithful person. Um, it doesn't mean that you've now taken vows of poverty or celibacy or, you know, um, sacrifice of everything you care about. On the contrary, a life of faith is a flowering of who you really are. Um, if I may use a personal example, I think I'm an artist. I mean, my whole life I've been an artist, and I'm still an artist. I'm making art now, and I think that faith really inspires me and informs my artwork. And I think my artwork's much better when I had no faith. Um, I think it's a
Hmm.
whole lot richer experience because when I make art, I'm seeking inspiration, and to be really inspired to try and make something meaningful and beautiful is a lot better than just making art for the sake of making art, which is what it used to be, before my faith.
So, would it be fair to say that when you have a community that's so focused on God, faith, prayer, and love, you don't really have to focus on evil. And if it does creep in, it'll be so easily identifiable
You got
that,
it. You got it.
yeah, that
Yeah.
you can
Like,
just,
one
yeah,
of the
go on.
things that Jesus showed me when we were visiting the future, which I want to add is not so far away from what he told me and showed me. Um, when a person had an injury or a sickness, that community would gather around them and they would lay hands on them and pray them and they would be healed immediately. So I'm not saying that all accidents and illnesses are a result of the demonic, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just, the physics of the world working itself out. Um, in our world today, miracles of healing happen, and I have been I've been with people who've been miraculously healed. But we don't control it. I mean, it's like sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't. In the future, 100% certainty. They're going to be healed
Wow.
like immediately. So, I mean, that's one example. And of course, one of the illnesses that is very difficult to heal in this world is mental illness, those kinds of illnesses. Um, and in the future, that won't exist. There won't be any mental illness. Everyone will be healthy in body, mind, and spirit.